Okay, in this lesson, let's go through some of the basics regarding how we work with our strings. Now, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste out of the script. So I'll just say copy, and then I'm going to come down here into my emulation environment, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to execute this code. Basically, what we're doing is we're creating a variable called a, and then we're assigning a data or value to that called Terry, and given the fact that it's in single quotes, I know that it's a string. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to print it. Now notice, the print function prints what is between the single quotes. If I just execute A, it's going to give me the entire string value, which is going to include the quotes. Now, another concept that we need to pay attention to here is when we do things like writing code. And I'm going to actually write my very first script. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to, actually, you know what, you guys may not have this in yours, so what we'll do is we'll come up and we'll say create a new file. Notice that new file has no format to it whatsoever. So as an example, if I come over here and I say #, this is my first script. Notice there's no orientation. There's no translation for symbols and keywords for any programming language. Now what I want to do is I want to change that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say plain text, and I'm going to type in the search Python, and then I'm going to highlight the Python, and you'll notice that the moment that I do that, it says this is a Python document, and it starts translating. Now this # symbol that we have here, right here in the beginning, is what we refer to as a comment or a remark symbol. So I normally include my comments using the # symbol, but sometimes I may actually need to do some things that may require me to modify my code. So as an example, let's come in here and write some values. So I'll say x equals, sorry, I didn't mean to have keys, x equals Terry. Notice it realizes that I'm doing a string, so it actually put the single quotes in for me. I'll say y equals Vincent, and then I will say z equals, and here we'll say 1.0. So, and in this scenario I'll say z1 equals 1. So here we have 4 values that we're working with. Now if I came over here and issued some commands like print x, print, no, and I'll say y, I'll say print, let's say z, sorry, and z1. Print z1. Okay, I've just written my first script. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to save this script. Now I'll hit File, and I'm going to say I want to save as, and you'll notice it's putting py on the end of it automatically because I told it it's a Python script, and I'm going to call this, we'll call this VOD first script. And I'm going to put it into a folder. So I'm going to go to Terry, I'm going to scroll down to where I see my python.net class, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new folder here, and I'm just going to call it VOD scripts, and then I'll just go into that, and that's where I'm going to save this script. So it's now saved. I can see where it's saved by going over here, and we see that I have VOD script that is currently being saved in the python-4net/VOD-scripts. Now what I want to do is I want to execute this script. So here's what we'll do. I'm going to go into my terminal session here, and I'm going to change to that directory list. There's that file. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to execute this as a script, Python 3, and I'll say VOD, and then the script that I want to execute. And I'm going to hit enter. Now notice it printed all of those values, but it doesn't really tell me, you know, what I'm quote unquote doing. So let's go ahead and let's make some modifications to the script. Now I'm going to do my best to make these videos relate more to routing and switching and controlling things later on, but right now we're just working with basic concepts. So I could come in here and say, comment and say setting the values for variables. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say print, and I'm just going to tell it that I want it to print something. I'm going to say section 1 of the script is running. So let's go ahead and just make this section 1. And then what I'll do is come down here and I will say this is going to be printing the values. And what I'm going to do is I want to modify this value right here. So I'm going to say print. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the value for x equals, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a space, I'll end my quote, and then I'll put a comma here. Now, let's see if this does anything. So what I'll do is I'm just going to save this script, and then I'm going to go back to my terminal, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to run that script. So let's run it. Now, notice it is giving me what I asked for. Section 1 of the script is running, and it says the value for x equals Terry. Now, let's go ahead and make a little bit more sense here. So what we'll do is we'll come down to the end of this. I'm just going to grab this value right here. I'll say copy. And then what we'll do is we'll actually paste it down here on line 10. And I'm going to change it and say section 1 of the script is done running. And then what I want to do is I want to make additional modifications here to where each of these are going to actually print out what I'm actually printing. So here I'll say, we'll just paste this in. So the value for x is, we'll change to y. I will come to the end here. I'll put my space in and my period. And it would be easier if I just type this. So the value for z equals, and the value for z1 equals. And there we go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to the very end of the script, and I'm just going to say print, and we'll say the script is done running. Alright, so now I'll just come over here and save this. So I'll say save as, or save. And then let's go back to our environment here, and I'm going to execute the script one more time. So it's going to be Python vod first script .py, and we see section 1 of the script is running, section 1 of the script is done running. I'm going to say value for x is Terry, value for y is Vincent, value for z is 1.00, and the value for z1 equals 1, and the script is done running. So it's actually executed everything that I've asked it to execute. Now, what if we had a problem and we were doing troubleshooting? So one of the options that I could do, let's go ahead and introduce an actual problem here. And what I'll do is I will say my problem is, I'm going to come over here and say sum equals, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say x plus, and we will say z1. So we know that that's not going to actually work. And what I'm going to do is I'm also going to come down here and I'm going to add a line that is going to say print the value of sum is, we'll use a equal sign and a space, and I'll use a comma, and we'll go ahead and just type sum since it's just a variable, and we'll save this script. So I'll say save. Now the script is saved. Let's go back to the terminal and let's run it. Now this script should crash. Notice it died. It says VOD first script pi line 10 in module says sum equals x plus z1, and it's not actually allowing me to function. Now, one of the things that I may choose to do is let's instead, I could come in here and I could just comment out this line for the purposes of troubleshooting. Notice it turned the entire line green. Now, if I save this and run the script again, what we'll find is it doesn't actually execute that line. So if I come over here, everything's good to go. The problem is it says the value of sum is a built-in function sum. Now, here's my problem, and this is one of the first things I want you guys to call your attention to. We have an issue here, and the issue is I actually used a value, a word, a variable that matched something that already exists in the system. So as an example, sum is one of those key words that I use. So let me come down here and I'll say sum of 1, 2, 3. Sorry, 30. Close it. I got to put them in. I'm doing a sum of a list. That's the reason I got to use the brackets. Anytime you see brackets, think list. And there's my value, 33. So it added 30 to 2 and 1. So added them all up and gave me a value. But if I come in here and I say sum equals and I say 44, notice it did not stop me. If I say sum, it's now 44. If I print sum, let me turn off my email. I apologize for that. So if I say print sum, it works. Now if I type sum now, and I use my parentheses, and let's do the exact same equation here, 1, 2, 30, end it, and close parentheses, notice it fails. Now the reason it failed has more to do with the fact that I changed the value of sum. Sum already had a value assigned to it. Also, we had, say for instance, round. Round had a value. It's a built-in function. So if you're going to use a variable and you don't know what it does, then what I would recommend you do is I would recommend that you type the command or type the variable that you intend to use. So as an example, we said round. Sum right now is an actual variable, not a built-in function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out of Python, and then I'll go back into Python, and then I'll type sum, and we can see here that now it's gone back to its default function. So keep in mind that we can create variables, and we can use almost anything we want to use, but we really need to be careful to make sure that we don't use variables that correspond to predefined functions and operations inside of Python. And if you have any doubt, it's like power, PW, is going to be a function. So I need to modify my script, and I don't want to use the idea of sum. So what we'll do is we'll say x, or we'll say, let's see, we'll say z1. No, can't do z1. We'll say z2 equals x. And then I'll come down here and I'll say z2. But we didn't fix our problem. Our problem is this line of code is not doing what I want it to do. But let's assume that I didn't know where it was. Let's say I had written my code into sections, and I wanted to just take out an entire section. Well, I could come in here and I could put these pound symbols in here and turn everything into basically comment lines or remarks. But another option that I do have available to me is I could actually employ a docstring. Now remember, we said that we could use docstrings to create variables, but I can create an empty docstring, and what will end up happening is the system will actually interpret that as a comment. So here we go. I'll just say whack, whack, whack. Notice everything turned amber. I'll come down here and I'll say whack, whack, whack. Now everything went back below it. So anything between these double quotation marks, let's do single quotation marks. Same results. And a lot of times you'll actually see me do things like x equals, let me turn caps on, we'll say x equals, and I will say Terry, and then I'll say y equals, and I'll use double quotes, Vincent. takes both commands, X and Y, and the system interprets both of these as strings. So it really doesn't matter how you denote these using the parentheticals. It's not using the parentheticals, but using the quotations. Just be consistent. I can't use a single and a double, and it's really recommended to pick one and use it, but every once in a while you will run into a problem where this does actually present an issue. So as an example, when we look at what's happening, if I come over here and say X equals, and I say Terry, and I say is not a programmer, and I close that out. Well, X is now equals Terry. But what if I wanted to use a contraction here? Well, I could come in here and say Terry isn't a programmer. But now I've got a problem, because of what I've just done is I've told the system that everything between the single quotations is now part of the string. So what I've done is that this second quotation, the system doesn't know what to do with it. So one of the things that I could do is I could change my configuration. I could use my delimiter here as my double quote, and now it actually takes it. If I say X, you'll notice it's set up there. If I say print X, it does exactly what I want it to do. So again, we have this idea of how we can actually remark out lines, remark out comments. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run my script. I'll save my script. I'm going to run my script, and what we'll find here is it should set no values. I've still got the configuration here. It says it set no value for X. It tells me exactly what's wrong and tells me where to find the issue. It says line 16. So if I look in my script and I go to line 16, it says I had an error issuing here. And notice the interpreter is actually giving me these little red underscores to let me know that these values have not been defined. So if I wanted to include Terry and make it set up and wanted to verify it, everything's good to go. Let's go ahead and save the script. Save. Now notice X doesn't have an underline on it, and if I do run the script one more time, what I'll see is it actually will fail, but it fails on the next line, which should in this instance will be 18. So if we take a look at what 18 is, it's going to be printing the Y. Removing these should fix my initial problem, but it's not going to fix the issue of Z2 not being working. So what I'll do is, just for the sake of argument, I'm going to come over here and I will remark out this, and then I'll come down here and I will remark this. Since we didn't set those values, I'll save. Notice I now no longer have any red underscores or any indications. We also have a section here called the debugging console we'll talk about later. Just bear in mind, let me go ahead and close this so I got more real estate. And again, I think I already saved it, but I'll save it one more time. And I'm going to execute the script. The script is working perfectly fine now. Why? Because I remarked out those line items. Now, what we want to do is we want to have a conversation about how we can do manipulations in order to be able to overcome the issues in our script. Because the big problem right now is we're trying to create a value for Z2. And Z2 is going to be the equivalent of a string plus a integer. Now, the problem is we have two different data types. And remember, if I use a plus sign with a string, I'm concatenating. If I use a plus sign with an integer, I'm doing math. So according to the way the Python interpreter is looking at the data, it can't actually do a concatenation because I don't have two strings, and it can't do a addition mathematical operation because I don't have two integers, or an integer and a float, or two floats. So what we've got to do is we've got to do something to be able to modify that, and what we'll do is we'll talk about that in the next video. I'm Terry Benson, and I'd like to thank you for watching.